Oh, goodness gracious me. I'm back. Many of you probably didn't even know I was gone, but I was actually gone for a while on vacation. All of these videos that you've been seeing recently, they've been edited on the go. And frankly, it's a miracle that any of them turned out half decent. But alas, the work waits for no one. I just flew in and I saw on Reddit a thread of DM confessions, habits and mistakes that DMs make that aren't great, but at the same time, they're not the worst thing ever. In fact, I think a lot of these habits are things that I also do, and I'm sure many of you do as well. So let's talk about them. How many of these are actually big deals, and how can we improve the ones that might be a bit of a problem at the table? Without further ado, let's get started. All right, starting out with improvising a detail on the spot and then not writing it down. Okay, so in terms of mid-session notes, I am the absolute worst. I basically never take mid-session notes, save for condition effects or damage on monsters. Those are the main places where I'm taking notes during the session. When it comes to NPC names I make up on the spot, I rarely write those down because, frankly, I rarely need to write those down. I usually have a description for the NPC, like the blacksmith is an orcish woman with auburn hair. But beyond that, I don't have a name, a backstory, etc., etc., etc. The only time really I've had a random NPC become a big deal in the campaign was a woman by the name of Sadie and her daughter Charlotte. They were two random NPCs the players encountered. They really, really loved them, and therefore I decided to flesh both of them out, give them both backstories, tie them into the campaign, and have them be a regular, recurring part of the story. My players loved that, but again, it's only really happened the once. Most of the time, my players get invested in non-player characters that I am already invested in, because that, by the way, is usually the cause and effect. There's a misconception that you shouldn't get invested in NPC until your players do it, but those people, in my opinion, they've got way the wrong way around. Look, players are not going to care about NPCs that you don't care about. Even when it comes to Charlotte and Sadie, those two random NPCs that my players got attached to, they got attached because, frankly, I liked playing the older cowboy mom Sadie and her adorable daughter Charlotte. It was fun for me. Clearly, I had something going there with the performance of it. I'm not going to pretend to be a good voice actor or anything. I'm not. But I was trying something. My players could see that, and they liked the characters. Therefore, that connection was formed. I've kind of gone off on a tangent here. I know I've kind of gone off the tangent here, but my point is that I rarely need to take notes during a session as a dungeon master. It hasn't come back to bite me in the bum just yet, but yeah, it's definitely a habit that I need to improve. Not just for NPC names, just for stuff in general. Okay, next up. One of my bad habits is being overly eager to suggest to the party what they should do. Oh my god, yes. Now, I will say that there's an opposite end of this advice that I don't like, and that is DMs who just plop their players into scenarios, especially convoluted scenarios, and then don't give them any hints on what they should do or any explanation. This is especially egregious when it comes to new players who have little expectation for what should be going on at the table. In those places, the DMs should be giving hints, or heck, I don't think it's a problem if DMs just give straight up paths. But when players are planning things out, stay quiet. Okay, if you could see the players figuring out what to do, let them just do that. If the players are lost, or if the players are requesting solutions, then that is where you offer them. This happens a lot in my campaign. Sometimes the players won't know what to do, where they should go, and therefore they go up to one of the NPCs that's tagging along with them and ask. And then that's when I do my little spiel. Now, I will say that, like I kind of implied earlier, I do engage in this bad habit a lot. There are times where I, as the dungeon master, not even as an NPC, will sometimes jump into the players' heads and just say like, hey, you could do this, without giving them a chance to think it through themselves. I am a very I don't know how to describe it, but I really don't like awkward silence. It bothers the heck out of me. I hate it. It's why I think music and ambience are mandatory at my games, because without them, I will die on the inside. Even with music and sound effects, though, I don't like it when my players are stuck, and I will very quickly jump in to help them out. But sometimes, I think that that's not necessary at all. My players just need a couple seconds, and I often do not give it to them. Look, like I said earlier, nothing wrong with offering hints or maybe even straight up paths, but make sure it's something the players actually want. And hey, make sure that they know they can request those things. Some players are nervous about asking their DM for help. Be available to them, but don't force availability. Forgetting to give a description when narrating an area. In my mind, I already know what it looks like because I created it. Basically what this person is saying is they describe a room, but instead of describing the size of the room and the features of the room, they just say, you walk into a room that's dimly lit. What do you do? Which, yeah, for a lot of players, that's not going to be very helpful. I will say, and this is a bit of a paradox with me, I'm a DM who really likes tactical combats, who really likes using every facet of the battle map that I put my players on. But when it comes to non-battle map locations, I am horrible with describing anything beyond the most basic flavor text. I mean, I never say, oh, the room is X amount of feet long, X amount of feet wide, there are X amount of windows, there are X amount of furniture, blah, 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 blah. I basically never do that. I say, you walk into the war hall and let them just kind of think about what that means, which, by the way, not a good habit, not good at all. There are many times throughout the campaign where I'll say, you walk into X room, and then the players explore the room, and then eventually they get ambushed by monsters, or something emerges from a doorway and they have to fight. And then I put up the battle map of the room, and the players are just shocked by how it actually looks because I conveyed none of that information. I need to get better with describing rooms outside of combat, or even rooms that are used in combat. I'm really bad at it. It's really good that Che Peku have got me when it comes to beautiful battle maps, but I gotta do some heavy lifting myself when it comes to describing said maps to the players. I pull punches too often. I'll lessen NPC's damage on the fly because it seems way too strong, and then my players just stomp them. I'm trying to trust CR a bit more. Got my opinions on that last bit, but when it comes to softening your punches, you guys know how I feel about this. Already said it myself. I don't pull my punches at all. I trust my players. I trust that they are up to the challenge. Look, we've been doing this for a while. I have tossed some truly insane combats at them. Vampire boss fights with extreme amounts of intricate minion mechanics. A multi-phase Vecna fight that lasted like 2-3 hours. That was epic and awesome. And you know what? Those fights were incredible. And we've done many incredible fights just like them. And I trust that the players are good enough to get through those battles intact. I feel like if I pull my punches, I'm doing them a disservice. You know, they're veterans. They've got this. If I don't trust them, I feel like that half the game is kind of lost for me. That challenge is part of what makes this game fun for us. Now, of course, if you, as a dungeon master, are running without that expectation of challenge, then maybe you should reconsider what I'm saying here. Keep in mind that tactical combat is a part of my game that I love. It's a big part of every single session, but that's not something for everybody. Maybe pulling your punches work for you, though I will say that I genuinely think that everybody should try running a harder D&D combat. Just take whatever you're doing right now, dial it up by a little bit, and just see what happens, you know? If you TPK your party, that's obviously bad, but just, take it a couple steps up and see where that goes, because the more difficulty your players face and then overcome, the more satisfying it is going to be. Okay, when it comes to that other piece of advice, think about CR. My relationship with CR has been just very strange. I will say that CR is not an exact science. You can't just sit there and think, oh, hey, if I use CR5 on level 5 players, that's automatically going to work. That almost never works for me. Like, maybe for ads in a fight, but usually the boss needs to be a couple levels above the players in order for it to be challenging. Maybe it's because my players are particularly powerful, or because there's 5 of them rather than 3. But yeah, just make sure to keep that sort of thing in mind. CR becomes such a crapshoot because so many people play D&D differently. Like, I think people expect way too much from challenge rating. Challenge rating, no matter what the game, is going to be a crapshoot because everyone's playing with a different number of players, which drastically changes the balance of the combat. Doesn't change it a little bit. Okay, people who think it changes it just like slightly, you people are dumb. Okay, I'm sorry, but the amount of players, even adding 1 player, radically changes how you balance the combat. Radically. On top of that, each player is going to have a different style. I mean, a war game veteran is going to be different from a brand new newbie, right? You gotta balance the combat differently. And on top of that, you got dice. You know, if the players roll a ton of natural 20s, well, the game is the way the game is, right? Sometimes that's going to happen, and therefore your boss is going to be taking a lot more hits. I think CR is the best that it can be, though I do think MCDM's class system, where monsters have classes like Brute or Ambusher, is a nice alternative to show what the monster should be used for. But in terms of a neat number, it's just going to tell you like, hey, this fight's going to be balanced now. I'm sorry, man, you're just not going to get that. You got to think about the fight more if you want to make it that perfectly balanced, tight combat. Oof. Next one, procrastinating on my session prep. Do you want me to be real with you right now? I think this isn't a great habit. But at the same time, this isn't homework. Like, people talk about procrastination when it comes to, you know, their work or their schoolwork, but this is Dungeons & Dragons. It's a game. Now, of course, you as a DM, you have a responsibility. You know, you gotta prep. If you don't prep, then your player's probably not gonna like the session that you're playing, just straight up. But at the same time, if you just don't have the time, or you just don't want to that week, it's okay to take the week off. Like recently, I've been really freaking busy, man. I've just had a lot going on in my life, and therefore, I've had less time to prep sessions, and I've taken a couple weeks off in the past month. That has been really nice for me. Does that mean I don't hang out with my friends on Friday nights? No, we still hang out. It's just instead of playing D&D, we play Minecraft. We play Helldivers. There are other things you can do with your friends. I feel like some D&D groups kind of get tunnel vision. Like, okay, we're the D&D group. We play D&D. But why? Why can't you play something else? Like, me and my friends enjoy tons of different things together because we're friends. D&D is just one thing that we enjoy. Yeah, it's the main thing. Like when we meet up on Fridays, the expectation is we are playing D&D. But if we can't, there's nothing wrong with jumping over to play Helldivers or to play something else in general. It is perfectly okay. Look, procrastinating on session prep is not a great thing, like I said. I don't think you should do it too often. But if you're procrastinating, there's probably a reason. It's probably because you're just not feeling it that week, you're busy that week, etc., etc. And you know what? That's part of life, man. Sometimes you're just not feeling it. And in those cases, I think it's time to just call the week off and, you know, try something else with your friends or just, you know, take a break. Oof. Final one, and I hope I have a lot to say on this because I'm pretty passionate about it. I have an issue getting caught up in my story and making calls that seek to preserve it, but doing so can cause issues at the table. That's called railroading, basically. And often, the response to this is, don't make a story, make scenarios. And I like that advice in theory, but I still think you need to build aspects of the story. Like, for example, the NPCs that your players meet, especially important quest givers, they should have personalities, backstory, tie into the players somehow, etc. Because if they don't, why would your players care about them? That's that thing that I talked about earlier. Those are elements of a story. What about the story of the city that they're in, or the pantheon of gods that your players worship, or the way their backstories tie into the narrative? Those are all aspects of a story. Make no mistake, when you're a dungeon master and you're running a roleplay heavy game, you're doing a lot of story stuff, okay? You are. I really dislike the advice of don't do story stuff in D&D because you do. You're just not creating like a linear book of a story. You're not writing a book when you're playing Dungeons & Dragons, but you create elements of the story and then prepare them so that you can figure out with your players how they're going to fit together. My advice isn't don't make a story. I think that's unhelpful. My advice is don't make too many solutions. Now, like I said earlier, there's nothing wrong with giving your players hints or paths, but in terms of solutions, solving the problems that your players come across, that's on them. That's their thing. And often, that's the best part of playing D&D is figuring out like, hey, this is the problem we're facing. How are we going to overcome it? And as a dungeon master, I just like seeing them do that. So, for example, in a short campaign I'm preparing to run, no spoilers because it's going to be on the channel, but in that campaign, the player's main goal is twofold. Number one, protect an NPC quest giver from people who want to hurt them. And number two, pull off a heist. They've got two problems there. And yeah, I have some ideas for how they can protect this person or how they could pull off this heist, but you know what? I'm not that attached to those ideas. I've talked in the past about player buy-in. Like, players need to play ball with you a little bit. Like, if my players just straight up refuse the entire quest of this short campaign, well, then we can't play. Straight up. But in terms of solving the quest after they take it, I mean, that's on them. I mean, how they're going to pull off this heist, that's on them to figure out. Again, I have ideas just in case they get stuck, but the solutions are primarily the player's prerogative, not mine. I create problems. only problems. And at the same time, with those problems, I also create story alongside the players. I don't know if this advice is helpful to anyone but me. Maybe that don't make story advice is helpful to someone, but for me, it's just never been that great because I feel like I am writing a lot of story stuff all the time. So I always feel guilty whenever I hear that advice, like I'm railroading my players, even though I'm well aware that I'm definitely not. They still have tons and tons of agency to interact with the story the way they want to, because I wrote it that way. Whew, and that's the end. Man, I was surprisingly eloquent for a dude who just finished like a 12, 15 hour plane ride back home. Guess my voice is just pent up from staying silent the whole plane ride. But in any case, if you guys enjoyed Vacation Crispy, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of our content, then you can check out our RPG horror story series, or you check out the best of the worst of Dungeons & Dragons. It's linked in the cards. And while you're there, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own tips or thoughts, go down in the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment confession to let me know you made it to the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you all next time. Farewell.